Hey, it's Drybear, back with another Diablo 4 build guide, and today we're going to talk about my companion druid build. This build focuses on using companions to their fullest and then mixing in support damage and actual damage from you with storm magic to mix those between the downtime of your companions and dealing enough damage to clear out the screen on top of you. If you're a big fan of companions and having pets and having these summon builds, but you don't want to play a Necromancer, then this is going to be the build for you. We start off with what is probably the most flexible and reliable ability in the Druid skill set, and that is going to be Wind Shear. A projectile that's super fast, nice reactive damage, and some modifiers on it that we'll find useful later on in the build. This is a storm ability and a nature magic ability, and it will build up your natural resource as well. For modifiers, we pick up the chance to make enemies vulnerable with high attack speed, especially with the legendary. We'll be able to build this up and proc it constantly, and we do get lots of bonuses off vulnerable targets as well. And then we branch to the right and we pick up 3 additional spirit for each enemy hit beyond the first. So when you hit a large group of enemies with your Wind Shear, when it penetrates, you'll get a lot of extra resource for that, which is where we're gonna get a lot of value out of that with the other storm ability that we have. So that's our builder. Our spender is gonna be Tornado, a strong storm build. And we'll talk about, I have other guides on storm specific builds for Druid, but it's easy to slot into this one because you can't make a full build out of just companions, and it's nice to have this extra bit on top of that. And we'll see once we get to the companions why that's important. But you spawn a tornado, it deals damage, and it has a chance to spawn an additional tornado, and enemies hit with tornado have a chance to become vulnerable, which you're hitting constantly. So combine this with Wind Shear and you have very high uptime on vulnerable, which we have modifiers for, but also is just a nice free damage amp on the target if they are marked vulnerable. Now we skip the next branch entirely because we're going to be spending a lot of our points in the companion tree for this build. It's a companion build, so it makes sense. We're going to pick up all 3 companions with full extensions on their modifiers, and we want the companion bonus as well, which gives you more damage based on how many companions you have spawned, so all of that synergizes well together. We want max points on Call of the Wild. Your companions deal 30% bonus damage, and when you're running all of them, it affects all of them. It makes these points spent in this part of the talent tree super valuable. Starting with Wolf Pack, we're going to want to pick up the wolves. These do insane single target damage. There's even some werewolf builds that use these to great effect, and we're going to pick it up here for the companion build. And then we're going to pick up increased damage to immobilized, stunned, slowed, or poisoned enemies. We have a couple of these as very easily and readily available, which is going to give more damage to our wolves. And then we go with the crit chance option, which is when you crit, your wolves gain attack speed for 3 seconds. A nice damage input increase for them. And it's also a little bit more than just 20% because the attack speed means that they will be able to attack and then reassess a new target. Attack speed in these kind of games for AI units is super helpful because it means that they can grab a new target and start moving towards it sooner and start readjusting themselves and keeping up with high motion targets. You tend to get some pretty nice uptime value increases from having attack speed on minions. Next, we want Vine Creeper. This is a big AoE activate. This one is the most important part of it. There's a Vine Creeper that follows you around and will periodically apply poisoning damage to other targets, which then will help your wolves deal more damage, which is nice. But then the active component is huge here. You activate it and it will root and poison all targets in an area. It can do some really nice damage on top of that, but again, that makes your wolves do more damage on top of that, plus the damage amp you have from vulnerable gives you great single target damage on bosses and elites. For modifiers, we want to pick up the immobilized duration increase. It just gives you a little bit more uptime on that scalar. And then critical strike chance increased against targets that are entangled or strangled by the Vine Creeper. Not only will this allow you to get the attack speed on your wolves easier, but it's just a nice overall crit chance damage increase for you. Next, we pick up Ravens. We're going to be able to modify this to have 2 Ravens above you, which is awesome. That increases your modifiers, and when we hit the legendaries, we'll figure out why that's important there. You have Ravens that fly above and periodically attack your enemies. I haven't found these to be crazy high damage. It's just kind of passive damage as they peck and poke at enemies that are coming around you, but it is kind of periodic, regular damage, kind of like a baseline bringing the DPS up. The cool part is the active. You activate this and in an area, it'll swarm down. It's like a little gust of wind. Enemies inside will take damage from it, which is really huge. You can see the number on the active damage is significantly higher based on your gear and what level you are. And then the modifiers here, we're gonna wanna make it so that when you put it down, Ravens inside of the active Enemies become vulnerable for 3 seconds. And you also get increased critical strike chance from this to enemies that are hit by ravens. This includes active or passive, as far as I can tell, so you'll be able to get some pretty nice increased crit chance, which again allows you to proc the attack speed increase for your wolves every time you crit. Next tree, there aren't a lot of really great options. I think as you get to the later part, like once you start unlocking Paragon, it's probably useful to get some of these storm passives here. Getting extra vulnerable proc chance is nice because with our ultimate ability, our key passive, we'll be able to get some nice scaling off that. But you can skip most of these, as the storm magic and your companions are basically the majority of what you're going to be doing. You don't really need anything major here. Trample's a nice one. It slots into most builds just because you can use it to reposition. You can knock enemies out of the way. You can even use it to heal yourself or get some fortify. There's some cool things you can do with that. But at base, for the synergies in this build, there isn't really anything that stands out in this part of the tree. For ultimate, we take Cataclysm because this gives you an option for dealing extra damage on top. You have lightning strikes causing vulnerability, which is great as well, which we're about to find out why. You have knockback, extra tornadoes, and this does inherit, at least on the last playtest that we had, it does inherit the effects of your tornadoes, which is super nice. We have some modifiers there that make that even better, but this is a 80-second cooldown, easy way to build this up and do not tons of damage, which opens up opportunities for your pets to deal damage as well. And lastly, there isn't a lot of companion synergy here, so what we're gonna go for is the Storm Companion combo build here with the final key passive, Perfect Storm. This makes it so your Storm skills grant additional spirit, so you build up your passive resource much faster when you're using Storm skills. Then they deal increased damage when damaging a vulnerable, immobilized, or slowed enemy. So between having your Wind Shear, your Tornado, and your Cataclysm, as well as the immobilize that you get from the Vine Creeper and the vulnerable procs you're getting from almost all of your abilities, you'll get this increased damage overall. 20% increased damage is awesome. It's a big scaler, especially when you have a well-optimized build for late game, and you build up more resource, which means you can then spend that on more tornadoes, which is a huge damage increase, and your pets are working on top of that as well. Talking about legendaries, aspect of the Umbral is awesome. Restore primary resource when you crowd control an enemy. This does include slows, by the way. So all of your slows, your immobilizes, your Vine Creeper, all of that is going to get you some nice resource, which then leads to more tornado spending. Aspect of the Expectant, probably until you get to max build, is going to be super useful because it means that every time you Wind Shear, you're increasing the damage of your next tornado. It's possible that at super optimized, you may not be able to get crazy value out of this. There's a lot of spirit generation in this build, and so you may end up not casting Wind Shear enough to get super value out of this, but it's possible that it stays that way. Even if you Wind Shear a couple times, getting 10 to 20% damage increase on a tornado can be nice. And this is the big winner in the build, Shepherd's Aspect. Core skills, Tornado, deal an additional damage for each active companion. So when you have max companions and you modify them to get as many out as you can, you're increasing the damage to a tornado, you're increasing the damage of the tornadoes coming out of your Cataclysm, unless they, it's possible they end up changing that or nerfing it, but it does kind of scale from that, which is nice. You have lots of tornado storm damage. Your storm damage is making your pets stronger. Your pets is making your storm damage stronger. All of it ties in together. I'll leave in here aspect of the Calm Breeze. This is a lucky hit. If you want to build for lucky hit procs, you can run this legendary as an option to increase your spirit. Wind Shear spamming builds that up, and then you'll get full spirit every now and then, which you can spend on a ton of tornadoes, which has high uptime. Super nice, super useful, but you do want to get enough lucky hit for this to be reliable and reasonable as an option. Rapid Aspect is cool here. It makes Wind Shear proc more, attack more, faster, faster, faster. Not only are you going to get higher chance of proc for your vulnerable because you're attacking more often. If you're running Aspect of the Expectant, you can get more damage scaling off of that. And if you run the lucky hit build, you can get even more spirit generation out of Wind Shear. All of that's nice. You also will want gain additional companion. In addition, your companion skills deal additional bonus damage. This one brings it all together. It means you can have 3 wolves, 2 ravens, 2 vine creepers. It adds an additional companion for each one of your companions and scales their damage on the skill portion significantly. So it makes your pets that much more viable. Also has the scaling of increasing core damage for each companion you have. All of it feeds into itself. And that's the Storm Companion build, a mixture of Storm and Companions. Again, if you like pet builds, this one's super awesome. It's super flexible and safe as well. It's probably great for leveling. It doesn't require as much as some of the other builds. It's possible this build loses out in highly optimized DPS scenarios to other Druid builds. This one's fun and it's an option for leveling. And it's probably pretty viable late game. It just requires more planning and prep and more possible movement. But again, in perfect high DPS, there's definitely other Druid builds that will beat this one. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.